ብዙ ሰው አሁን በዚህ ሰዓት ይሄ የፓብሊክ ቻርጅ ሩል የሚባለው በትራምፕ አድሚኒስትሬሽን የወጣው ህግ እንዴት አድርጎ አፌክት እንደሚያደርገን በተለይ በኢሚግሬሽን ኬዝ ላይ ያሉ ሰዎችን በምን መንገድ አፌክት እንደሚያደርጋቸው የትኛውን አይነት እርዳታ መውሰድ እንደሚችሉ የትኛው አይነት እርዳታ መውሰድ እንደሌለባቸው በምን አይነት አፌክት እንደሚያደርጋቸው ብዙ ሰዎች ጥያቄ አለባቸውና ያንን በተመለከተ ነው እንግዳችንን የጋበዝናት። በጣም ልምድ ያላት ሎየር ነች። በዚሁ በፓብሊክ ቻርጅ ዙሪያን በተለያየ ቦታ ኢንፎርሜሽን የምትሰጥ ሰው ነች እና እሷን ዛሬ ጋብዘናታል እና ዛሬ ኢንፎርሜሽን ስለ ፓብሊክ ቻርጅ ማንን ምን አፌክት እንደሚያደርግ ኢንፎርሜሽን ትሰጠናለች። Thank you again, Agatha, for coming and giving us this info. So now you can go ahead and start. Thank you.
Thank you so much, for inviting the APLRC this morning. I'm really honored to be with you all. And as a working mom, I definitely understand that many parents are busy right now trying to teach their kids with this during this pandemic. You're being tasked with not only continuing to be a parent, but also now teacher, and maybe also some of you are working from home. I'm in the APLRC office today, but our office remains closed due to the pandemic, and I mostly work from home. But please know that the APLRC helpline is open to all. We continue to provide consultations and webinars such as this over the phone and via video conference. And there are some applications that we can also still assist people with remotely. The Asian Pacific American Legal Resource Center is a small nonprofit based in DC that was formed mostly to help the Asian immigrant community and around language access issues. We realized when it was founded about 20 years ago that the Asian immigrant community is so many different languages and very few organizations that could provide legal interpretation. But the organization has really grown, and I'm proud to say part of helping it expand its work. And we serve people from all over the world. Some of you might know me because I've been helping to run the APLRC's citizenship program for the last couple of years. It's called the New Americans Campaign. If you currently have a green card and you have had a green card for 5 years or 3 years through marriage, and you're considering about applying for citizenship, for naturalization, please do not hesitate to contact the APLRC. We would be happy to help you with that. All of our services are free. We're a nonprofit. We do have income guidelines we have to follow, so we only serve low-income individuals. So that might be a reason why we would not be able to serve you, but for naturalization, our services are less restricted. But today I want to talk a little bit about public charge. Before I get into that, I also do want to introduce my colleague, Genevieve Discar, who I believe is the call today. She's our new staff attorney for Maryland, so you may very well be interfacing with her, especially if you're a resident of Maryland. In addition to immigration, the APLRC also does some family law matters, some housing, employment, including unemployment, insurance claims. So please know that we're a resource here for you. We're based in DC, but we serve people in Maryland and Northern Virginia as well. Public charge. First, just to say a little bit of history. First, I want to go into the good news, because I know this is something Hamarawa told me was very important to you, is who is subjected to this test? Because there's actually a lot of categories that are exempt from this test. The public charge admissibility test applies only to some immigrant visa categories, mostly people that are looking to stay here for a long time. So the F1 or the H1B, as you might know, H1B is for skilled workers. It's workers who are sponsored by an employer to come in, but there's a path to a green card, so the plan that you will eventually be getting that green card. Or if you're already in the United States and you're applying for a green card for the very first time, maybe you're being sponsored by a spouse or your parents or a family member. Family petitions, whether you're in the US or you're sponsoring a family member abroad, back in Ethiopia, your spouse, your children, your siblings, or your parents. Those are the individuals that undergo a public charge screening. But there are many categories that are exempt. First and foremost, if you already have your green card and you just need to renew your green card, you are exempt. You do not go through the public charge screening again. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about coming up in the next part of the presentation, just know that if you are in any of these categories, this public charge rule does not apply to you. If you're renewing your green card, if you're applying for naturalization or citizenship, what I talked about in the very beginning, does not apply to you. There's no public charge screening at the time of being interviewed for citizenship. And very importantly, asylees and refugees. If you came to the United States and you sought asylum, or you came as a refugee and you were granted asylum and you were granted refugee status, and now you're in the process of applying for that first green card, you will not be subject to the public charge test, even if it's your very first green card. It's very important to keep in mind. If you're an asylee or refugee, this does not apply to you. If you have an approved T, U, or VAWA visa, T and U and VAWA are all different types of immigrants who have suffered different crimes, like domestic violence, trafficking,
look at it,
or any other kind of, there are several different types of crimes that qualify for the U visa and the T visa and the VAWA. If you have an approved T or U or VAWA and you're now again are in the process of adjusting status to that first green card, you are exempt from the public charge test. It does not apply to you. DACA and TPS, temporary protected status, DACA, deferred action for childhood arrivals. That is, those are both unfortunately temporary statuses. It does not have a path to a green card. So there is no public charge screening for them either. And then Afghani and Iraqi employees of the U.S. Armed Forces, what are called special immigrant visas or SIV, they are also exempt from the public charge test. So, but one thing to keep in mind is that if you now have your green card, even if you got it as an asylee or a refugee, and now you want to sponsor a family member as the visa sponsor, not the beneficiary, not the family member that you're trying to bring in, but you yourself are now the sponsor, some of these factors might still be at play. In particular, prior use of some public benefits, and if you've ever used a fee waiver before, just will have an impact. It's not going to be applied in the same way. I know the public charge rule is very confusing, but I just wanted to highlight that. So here's the old rule versus the new rule. On the left, we have the old rule. The old standard used to be that you would be primarily dependent on public benefits, meaning you really could not work, you had no other income. The only way you could survive was using SSI and TANF, and it was limited to SSI and TANF. SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income, and TANF stands for temporary, I think, cash assistance for needy families. And the old standard looked a lot at the sponsor, the affidavit of support from the sponsor. If you had a strong sponsor, that would often help you overcome the fact that you might be coming in with a serious health condition, or not having a lot of work experience, or not having an ability to work. They looked more at the sponsor. Now the new standard is looking a lot more at the applicant, him or herself. And the standard has been greatly reduced to more likely than not. So it used to be a very high standard, primarily dependent, to more likely than not. More likely than not to receive any of 9 different public benefits for more than 12 months, or 12, think of that more as units, within 36 months. So a total of 3 years. Now this is a lot of numbers to keep track of, but essentially what we're talking about is the public benefits, which have been expanded, as you can see to the bottom. It includes Medicaid, food stamps, and public housing, and then includes still the old categories of SSI and TANF. If you receive 12 units of those over any 36-month period, that could be an indicator that you are more likely than not to become dependent. So it's not saying you can't use them at all, but if you use them for more than 12 months at one time, or you use more than one benefit, say you have both Medicaid and food stamps for a total of 12, you have them at the same time. So each one is 1 unit. If you use them both for a total of 6 months, that would be 12 units because it's 2 different benefits. Now, the thing that's really confusing about this is that, again, you're looking at the applicant. And as many of you probably know, because many of you listening are immigrants yourselves, have been through this process. Maybe you now have your green card and you've had it for 5 years. You know that you weren't eligible for any of those benefits until you had your green card and until you had been here for 5 years, because somebody was your sponsor and signed an affidavit of support saying that you would not use any public benefits. That's part of the requirement from the old standard. And so that's part of the reason why this new rule change has gotten so many people confused, is because they're looking at public benefits, but they're really only looking at the use of those benefits by the beneficiary, which, if you think about it, the beneficiary is not even eligible at the time they're applying. So there's no way they would have even used these benefits. Only the sponsor could have used these benefits. So in many ways, the emphasis on the public benefits is what we say in English is a bit of a red herring. I don't know what the phrase is in Amharic, but it's like a distraction. So I want to talk about the other factors of the new rule because they're more important, and I think they're things that we have to be more careful for and look out for. And in a way, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, I just want to say, if you yourself have a green card already, and you're eligible for using Medicaid, food stamps, public housing, SSI, TANF, you're safe. You have a green card already. It is perfectly safe and perfectly fine for you to use those things that you're eligible for, that you have paid taxes and contributed towards. And especially during this time of the pandemic, if you're eligible for services and you need those services, please, please, please use them, because you are not going to be subject to the public charge test again. You already have your green card, you're already here. Or if you're an asylee, refugee, you're exempt from the public charge test. So this is really looking at people who don't even yet have a green card. And so most likely they're not even eligible for those benefits. So it was expanded. And again, I put it in red so it's really clear. The public benefits that they're looking at are only those that are used by the applicant, by the person seeking to get that first green card. It was expanded to include SNAP or food stamps, federal public housing, Section 8 assistance, Medicaid, cash assistance programs. These are all federal public benefit programs. I want to emphasize that this does not include other state, county, and local benefit programs. It does not include soup kitchens, food pantries, food aid you might get from the Ethiopian Community Center or Montgomery County, the Gilchrist Center, your church, your temple. It doesn't include all of these local initiatives. If it's not on this list, it's not part of the public charge test. So again, and I know that this is being recorded and be shared with others, but if it's not on this list, it's not a public charge. It's not a public benefit that is counted as part of the public charge test. So again, if there are food banks, soup kitchen shelters, and other programs right now that are helping people with food during this pandemic, please make use of those if your family needs those. It also doesn't include a very important federal program called WIC, which stands for Women and Infant Children. Women who are pregnant and children up to the age of 2 can participate in WIC. This helps give you formula, diapers, prenatal and postnatal care, very, very important care for pregnant and new moms. CHIP, free school lunch programs, emergency medical care, none of this is included in the public charge test. And so if you have any question about a public benefit that you might currently be enrolled in and you're really worried about what that might mean in terms of your family, please get legal advice before withdrawing from any public benefit. Again, the APLRC helpline is still operating, even though our office is closed because of the pandemic. We can still give you advice over the phone, and I would really encourage you to seek advice before withdrawing your family from a service that your family might really need, and that they're whatsoever in accessing that. But these are the other factors that I think are more important to look at, and very significant changes to the public charge rule change. The public charge rule change is a multi-factor test. It's looking at not only prior use of those benefits, which again is very unlikely that the applicant ever used those benefits we mentioned because they weren't eligible for them before they had their green card, and they're actually not going to be eligible for them for quite a long time after they get their first green card. But the other factors that the public charge rule looks at is your age, particularly if you're under the age of 18 or over the age of 62, your health. Have you ever had health insurance before in another country? Do you have any pre-existing health conditions? Your family status. And this means not just are you married or not, or do you have children, but how many people are living with you? How many people are dependent on you? How many people are you dependent of? Like, are you supporting a lot of extended family members, or are you being supported by other extended family members? And looking at where your income and financial support comes from. Your income, any assets that you might have, education level, including knowledge of English, and work experience and workplace skills, and then use of a fee waiver in the past. Now, again, this is all factors that looking at the applicant, not the sponsor. So say, for example, I'll try to make it as concrete as possible. Say, for example, you are now living in the United States, you came as a refugee. You got your first green card, maybe you've even naturalized, now you're a US citizen, and you want to petition for your brother who's still living in Ethiopia. Maybe your brother has visited the United States before. Maybe he petitioned for something in the past, and maybe you even he used a fee waiver. Chances are he didn't use a fee waiver after February 24th, 2020, because there hasn't been very much travel since March. But if he had used a fee waiver or some other immigration petition, that would be a count against him. But most likely the fee waiver thing doesn't apply, but just mention it. More likely they're going to be looking at, is your brother over the age of 62? Has he ever worked? Has he ever had health in Ethiopia? Does he have a pre-existing health condition? Was he getting treatment in Ethiopia? Is he resolving that health condition? Does your brother speak any English? What's his education level? What's his work experience? So it used to be, again, the old public charge rule would look more at your income level. How much would you be able to support your brother and if he's married and has family, you're bringing them to the United States, how much would you be able to support him? Now they're looking at him, the beneficiary coming in, the applicant for that green card, and what is his potential for wealth, essentially? What is his potential for earning a living and living in the United States and then not being dependent on any public benefits? And so many people call this new public charge rule, they call it a wealth test on immigration, because it's not just looking at someone's history, but it's the potential for wealth. And so unfortunately, as you can see by these factors, it really, this new public charge rule, we fear, and many, I'm not the only one, but many people fear, will have a disparate impact on women, and particularly elderly women, because globally women have less access to education and they have less access to work outside of the home. And so this might be a much tougher test to pass now for someone, for example, who wants to bring their elderly parents who are already retired, or maybe their mom who never really worked much outside the home. She's over the age of 62, she might not speak English very well, and she doesn't really have much education or work experience. These are the other factors. She'll never have used public benefits in the United States. She'll never have used Medicaid or food stamps because she's not here. She's still in Ethiopia. But these are the other factors that might make it very hard for her to be screened to come in. So what are some of the things that people could do while they're waiting for their visa to be processed? Well, they could start learning English. This is the first time also that English has ever been a factor for people who are immigrating for the very first time. Start trying to take an English class online. Continue with education. If somebody maybe started a degree but didn't finish, continue with their education wherever they are. As you know, green card applications can take a long time. While your brother is waiting or your mom is waiting for their visa to be approved, they can start taking some classes and getting more experience and preparing. If they have a health condition, start trying to get treatment for it if possible where they are. Try to resolve some of those health issues prior to immigrating to the United States. Health insurance also, if it's possible to purchase private health insurance, that's one of the best things you could do just before the visa interview, before you're going to go through the consular processing. Again, for the brother, for example, coming from Ethiopia, it would be very good if he could show at the time of his visa interview at the consulate in Ethiopia that he has health insurance. Or if you currently live in the United States and you are on health insurance, talk to your employer, talk to your health insurance provider about adding dependents once they arrive in the United States, and be able to show that you'd be able to immediately enroll them in health insurance. That would be a very positive factor in your family member's favor. So just want to reiterate, and I want to leave a lot of time for questions, but just a few last things and to reiterate some important things that I said before. If you already have a green card or you're applying for citizenship, you're just doing a renewal of a green card or citizenship, public charge does not apply to you. However, it's very, very important to always beware of trips outside the United States that last more than 6 months or 180 days at one time. So not added together, but if you left, say you left in January and you didn't come back until July, you left in month 1 and you come back in month 7, that would be over 6 months. Those trips, they disrupt your residency, and it can be hard then later to apply for citizenship. But also after 6 months, you may be, it hasn't happened a lot before, but you are potentially going to be screened again for public charge. So this is the only time, the one time, when people who already have a green card might be screened again for public charge admissibility. So this was not something that was very strictly enforced before. We do not really know if this is going to be enforced more, because the rule again just changed in February of 2020. And right after that, the pandemic hit and people haven't been traveling. But if things open up and you're traveling again, please, please, please be careful. If you're on a green card, do not stay outside the United States for more than 6 months at one time, because it can really mess up your green card status, as well as opportunities for citizenship later, if that's something you want, as well as there is this risk of being rescreened for public charge. A couple of things particular to COVID-19. Many people have asked us, is unemployment insurance a public benefit? It is not a public benefit. Unemployment insurance is, just like the name sounds, it's an insurance policy. You, in fact, have already, if you're paying taxes and your employer is paying taxes on your wages, you've already been paying for that insurance. Every time there's a payroll tax, every time you see those taxes come out of your paycheck, that's going into the state unemployment insurance fund. In the event that you become unemployed and you suddenly need to withdraw, you need to use that insurance. So it's an insurance policy. You pay it forward, you take it when you need it. It is not a public benefit. For some of you might know, some of you maybe weren't eligible for unemployment insurance because you hadn't worked enough units, you hadn't paid enough into the fund, and you weren't able to withdraw from it. But just keep in mind, unemployment insurance, absolutely not a public benefit, not something that's going to be considered at all in terms of public charge. Second, also, all of the sort of COVID stimulus checks, the pandemic stimulus, all of that stuff, it's not a public benefit. That it was something that was done by the federal government and different state programs, again, to try to help people during this time of great difficulty with the pandemic and so many people out of work, and businesses, small business owners. Also, there were some loans and different programs that were offered. None of those are going to be considered part of the public charge test. And also, right after the pandemic hit, and also wasn't long after the public charge rule went into effect, USCIS issued guidance that said, if you have to use Medicaid for COVID-19 testing or treatment for yourself or a family member, that use of Medicaid for anything related to COVID-19 will not be counted against you. That use of Medicaid for that purpose is not going to be counted as part of the public charge test. That said, this is yet to be adjudicated. We don't know how this is going to come out. As we all know, we don't just enroll in Medicaid when we get sick. We enroll in Medicaid because we want to have health insurance in case we get sick. And so it's very hard to enroll in Medicaid only for one thing. But if you did find yourself, if you got sick or someone in your family got sick and you very quickly enrolled in Medicaid and you stayed on Medicaid throughout the time that they've been getting treatment, know that that time period is not going to be counted against you. You may want to consider, again, depending on what you're doing with immigration-wise, you may want to consider leaving Medicaid, but please consult with an attorney before leaving Medicaid once the COVID issue is resolved, but please consult with an attorney before you do that. So this is our email address, our helpline number, our office. We're, again, closed right now, our website. We do try to put updates on our website. I believe there's a lot of public charge information already there, but we will include more as there's news. So I want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers, but also I wanted to just see if there's anything you wanted to go back over in Tigrinya or Amharic, just to make sure that everybody is able to sort of capture the biggest points here.
Thank you so much, Agatha. Gave us a really very important information. And yeah, so I think I see mostly Amharic speakers in there. So I'm just going to say a little bit in Amharic, and then I'm going to leave some time if people have questions. ይሄኛው አሁን ዛሬ እንግዲህ ኤክስፕሌን የምታደርግልን በጣም የሚጠቅም ህግ ነው። ምክንያቱም ብዙ ሰው በጣም ችግር አለው በዚህ ላይ ይጨነቃል። እንዴት ነው አፌክት የሚያደርገኝ? በተለያየ ጊዜ ሰዎች እርዳታ መውሰድ እየፈለጉ አንድ ለሚያስፈልጋቸው ለቤተሰባቸው ለራሳቸው እየፈለጉ ግን ይሄ ነገር አፌክት ያደርገኝ ይሆናል ብለው እየፈሩ የሚፈልጉት እርዳታ የሚታቀሙ በጣም ብዙ ሰዎች አሉና የናንተ ኬዝ እዚህ ላይ ምን እንደሆነ አናውቅም። ግን ዛሬ ያሳየችን ዋና ነገር ምንድነው? አንደኛ ነገር በተለይ የኛ ኮሚኒቲ ላይ ይሄ ነገር አፌክት የሚያደርገው ነገር አንደኛ ነገር ይህ ነገር ሪፊውጂ የሆኑ ሰዎችን ሪፊውጂ ስታተስ ላይ ያሉ ሰዎችን ለሪፊውጂ ያመለከቱ ሰዎችን ምንም አፌክት እንደማያደርግ፣ ሁለተኛ ነገር አሳይለም እየጠበቁ ያሉትንም እነሱንም አፌክት እንደማያደርግ ይሄ ፓብሊክ ቻርጅ ሎ ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ አሳይለም ወይ ደግሞ ሪፊውጂ ላይ ስታተስ ከሆነ ያላችሁት እሱን እየሆነ ከሆነ እየጠበቃችሁ ያላችሁት ይሄ ፓብሊክ ቻርጅ ከእናንተ ጋር ምንም ግንኙነት የለውም። እሱን ነው በደንብ ዋናው የነገረችኝ። ከዛ በኋላ ደግሞ ኦሬዲ ግሪን ካርድ ያለው ሰውም ከሆነ ይሄም አፌክት አያደርገውም ብላለች። ግን ግሪን ካርዱን ሌላ ሀገር ሄዶ 6 ወር 6 ማንት ቆይቶ የመጣ ሰው አፌክት ሊሆን ይችላል። በዚህ ነገር ሊጠይቁት ይችላል ከ6 ወር በላይ ቆይቶ ከመጡ። ሶ ያስረዳችን ያለችው እንግዲህ በዚህ ላይ ነው ማለት ነው። እና ከዚህ ጋር ተያይዞ እንግዲህ እኔ ያላችሁ ጥያቄ በዚሁ ላይ ኤክስፒሪየንስ ያላት ሰው ስለሆነች እኔ ያላችሁ ጥያቄ መጠየቅ ትችላላችሁ። So what I just explained to them, Agatha, is that I just wanted to reiterate what you said about people who have immigration cases, especially that people that are waiting, that are asylee status and waiting for their green card, or people who have refugee status, that this public charge law does not apply to them. And I also mentioned that with the new law, I mentioned that people who have green card already, this does not apply to them. But I also explained that somebody who has a green card who might have left the country for more than 6 months, when they come back, they may be interviewed or the public charge law might apply to them. That's what I gave information for. So one thing that I want to ask, I know you've explained it very well. I just want our viewers to hear this. You've mentioned that does not affect people who have green asylee or refugee status, but you mentioned exactly the type of population that this public charge affects. If you can reiterate that, like 1, 2, 3, 4, that who is it that it affects? Just in 1 minute type of thing. Who is it that it particularly affects, especially for those who joined a little bit late, if you can mention that.
Sure. So this slide is, again, the people that are subject to the public charge test includes people applying for a green card for the very first time, whether you're applying from within the United States or outside the United States. There's a public charge screening by USCIS. There's also a public charge screening by the State Department that happens at the consulates abroad. Some of you maybe remember you were interviewed at the US consulate in Ethiopia to get your green card to come in. So the screening would happen there. Or you apply, maybe you got married to a US citizen and then you apply for your first green card here in the US.
Yes.
Those are the people who are very first time applying for a green card. And then a few other visa categories. H-1B is the big one. H-1B is skilled workers because they have a path to a green card. It's an employment visa, but there's an opportunity for them to, to after 3 years apply for a green card through their employer or maybe somebody else. And an F1. F1 visa is students, student visa. Though there are most other short-term, what they call non-immigrant visas, such as an O visa or R visa or H2A, H2B. Those are temporary, low-skilled workers, and they're seen as temporary. They're seen as people who are just going to be here for a short term for one job, and then there's no path to a green card. And so there's no screening for those. The really big category that I think probably applies to some of your listeners are those family petitions. So you're applying for, you are already a green card holder yourself or a US citizen, and now you're applying for either your spouse, your husband or wife, your sibling, your brother or your sister, your children, and maybe your children are already married and they now have families of their own. Those are the immediate family categories that are eligible for sponsorship. And you yourself might have gotten your status as a refugee or asylee. And so you yourself were not screened for public charge when you got your green card, but now you're sponsoring a family member, they would be screened for public charge. Again, since most likely a lot of these family petitions, your family members are still in Ethiopia. So the whole public benefits thing, it's not really going to apply to them because they've never have used public benefits in the US because they're not in the US.
Yeah.
If somebody was already here, maybe your family member is already in the US and so you're applying for them from within here, then you would be more careful to see if they had ever used public benefits in the US. But again, if they have never had a green card before, it's very unlikely that they were ever eligible for any of these federal public benefits. It's also important to keep in mind that we're only talking about a few types of public benefits. We're not talking about, I want to show this list again. It's only these 4 benefits: SNAP or food stamps, federal public housing or Section 8, Medicaid. Medicaid's not Medicare. Medicaid, if it has the word aid in it, it means help, like aid money, right? Versus Medicare is for seniors, not the same thing. Medicaid, and as you can see, there's even a big exception here. Emergency services and children under 21 and pregnant women and new mothers, the WIC program, all of that is not counted. So it's only people who are using Medicaid as their main form of insurance, above the age of 21. And cash assistance programs like supplemental security insurance and TANF, those are the only ones that are counted. So if you have family members here, and because they were never eligible for Medicaid, maybe they go to the Mary's Center. I don't know if you guys know that clinic, or they go to the MCC, the Muslim Community Center, and they go and they pay out of pocket. They don't have any insurance because they can't enroll in Medicaid because maybe they don't even have a Social Security number yet. Those types of clinics are not counted as part of public charge. You're paying out of pocket. There's no Medicaid. It's a local clinic where you just pay out of pocket. Going to a local food pantry, a food bank, getting food from your church, that is not counted. Your children getting free lunch at school or even free breakfast, that's not counted. So I just really want to emphasize this, especially during this time with the pandemic. I know there are a lot of people who need a lot of help right now. It's understandable. And please do not be afraid to use those local and state and community resources, because if it's not on this list, it's not going to be a factor at all in the public charge test.
Wow, this is so helpful, Agatha. This is really, really helpful. I know that it will help so many people. For some reason today, that a lot of people told me there was issue with the Zoom. I'm so glad we are recording this, because I will promise you that it will reach so many people. Because especially during this COVID time, I have had so many people have asking me, and I'm not going to take any, even type of services that you just talked about, such as Mana Food or something. They don't want to take any type of assistance because they are afraid it will be counted against them. And so we have lots of misconceptions, like she has told us today, especially the ones that I see specifically in the Ethiopian community is, and actually in many African communities is what I see is this confusion with refugee and asylum issue. And I have, so, as she has told us, this one does not apply to them. Now, and she has given us the main statuses, immigration statuses that this affects. Now, this is my question for you. Let's say there is someone who has applied for their asylum, and they're bringing their spouse from back home. You said does not apply to them, but it applies for the person they're bringing, for the spouse back home. Now, let's say the person here have used lots of services here, not the wife back home, but the person here has used lots of government services. Does the fact that he or she has used lots of services here, does it affect the spouse status back home?
Yeah. So first of all, as an asylee or a refugee, you can bring family members also as asylees or refugees. Mm-hmm. So if you're bringing your family member as they call a derivative or a second asylee, if they're on your petition, and they might also get asylum status or refugee status, then again, they're also exempt from public charge. Mm-hmm. So my example was only if maybe you originally immigrated as a refugee or asylee, and now you have your green card, or you've even become a U.S. citizen, and now you're doing a family petition.
Yes.
That is where they're going to look at the family member coming in through the public charge test.
Yes.
If you as the sponsor ever used public benefits in the past, mm-hmm. that might make it hard. I'm going back to, sorry, let me go back to this slide. So there is still the affidavit of support. The sponsor still has to, that's been part of the process for a long time. And it used to be that the best way for someone to overcome the test of public charge was that they had a strong sponsor. Now, if somebody has used a lot of benefits in the past and maybe still is using benefits, the chances are that they're not going to be able to be the only sponsor. They're probably going to have a joint sponsor because they're not going to have enough income. But if they have, they used a lot of benefits when they first arrived as a refugee or asylee, and then they took some time, got on their feet, and now they have a good job and they're able to be the sole sponsor. that should be enough. The new public charge test looks much more at the person coming in, not the sponsor. So it is a factor in terms of looking at the strength of that affidavit of support, and it's a factor of whether or not you'd be able to be the sole sponsor, but it's not going to be ruled against the applicant in the same way. I mean, they're not counting your units. Like this column on the side of more likely than not to use 9 benefits, 12 months and 36, blah, blah, blah. That is a test that's only applied to the person coming in, the beneficiary. It's not applied to the sponsor. But looking at the strength of that affidavit of support, they will look at, especially for anybody on the call who's done this before, to be a sponsor for a family's petition, you have to show the last 3 years of income. You have to show your last 3 tax returns, and you have to have a certain income level. If you don't have a certain income level based on your last 3 years of taxes, then you have to find a joint sponsor. And the chances are that if you had a certain high enough income level, then you were no longer also eligible for Medicaid or other things because your income increased. And now you might have Obamacare. You might be enrolled in sort of subsidized health insurance, but off of the free market, but not just straight up Medicaid, because your income has increased.
Yes. So they look at the income to see if that person has enough income to sponsor,
Exactly, right.
But you said they can also double sponsor, right?
Yes, you can have a joint sponsor.
Joint sponsor, okay. So I'm going to leave it to our audience. My colleagues are here as well. If you guys have any question, let me just take 1 minute and say in Amharic. Okay, Mikey has a question. I think we replied that, but I'll give it to Agatha again. So አሁን እንግዲህ ያለችን ነገር ለማ አፕላይ እንደሚያደርግ ነግራናለች። በብዛት ደግሞ ይሄ ነገር ደግሞ ደጋግማ እንዳለችው ለአሳይለም እና ለሬፊውጂ እንደማይሆን ነግራናለች። ማይክ ማለት አፕላይ እንደማያደርግ ለዛ ማለት ነው። Maki is asking how about for asylum pending status. So I think Agatha, what she has mentioned was that this does not apply people who have asylum pending, because this one is under different rule. People who have asylum and refugee, that's a different type of rule, right, Agatha?
Absolutely, yeah. So pending asylum or pending refugee, pending T visa, U visa, go back to that slide. It doesn't apply to you if you're waiting for asylum status or refugee status. It doesn't apply to you if you already have asylum or refugee status and you are now applying for your first green card.
Any question? Because I think this is very new to most of us, and so I'll leave for you guys. You guys can write it on chat as well, or ask it. The example I can give is that I have seen it with my own experience, Agatha. My husband, he got green card through me. So when we got interviewed, they asked us, have you used any type of services? That was one of the questions that we were asked, any type of service. And I think that was part of the question. So I just remembered, and he was getting his green card through me. So I remember that, this is part of the public charge question.
How long ago was that interview?
Oh, just recently, actually. This was just recently, about a month ago. So but he didn't, the person who interviewed us, he didn't go through deep in it. Maybe he has my record or something, but he asked me, have you taken any type of benefit? Have you, that's, okay. So somebody else said, this is a question, she said, this one is a little bit different. She said, applicants since 2016 who have not gotten interviewed yet, what's new for them?
So If the applicant is here in the United States, they will be interviewed under the old public charge standard. If the applicant is outside of the United States, unfortunately, they will be subjected to the new rule. There's a little box, I didn't bring a lot of attention to it, but you'll see down here that the USCIS, so that's US Citizen and Immigration Services, that's the main agency in the United States that oversees applications that are filed in the United States. That new rule went into effect as of February 24th, 2020. So very recently. It kind of feels like forever ago with the pandemic. Time is, so for applications filed before February 24th, 2020 in the United States, they're all under the old standard. However, Department of State and Consular Processing, so applications filed outside of the United States where someone is going to be interviewed at a US consulate abroad, though that rule changed well before February 24th, 2020, over a year ago. And also that rule change applies to anybody who's being interviewed as of February 24th, 2020. So even if you applied for your brother like 10 years ago and he's finally being called for his interview, he will be interviewed under the new standard, not the old standard, unfortunately.
I see.
So it depends where you're going to be interviewed.
Makes sense.
And when you filed.
I see. I get different questions from people who ask me, Agatha. They said, okay, I'm going to ask that as thank you, that's one good question. Who asked me, they said, I applied for my asylum, for my refugee. It has been a long time since I applied. I have not gotten any reply. They said 4 years, they have not gotten any reply. So is there a timetable for that you know of when they will be called, or is it something associated with, the government or?
So there is, there's a huge immigration backlog. There's a backlog in pretty much every application category. Even the ones that, even immediate relatives, so sponsoring a spouse, a husband or a wife, or young children, those, used to take less than a year are taking more than a year because of the backlog. But for asylum in particular, there's at least a 5-year, sometimes more, wait time right now from the time that you file until you have that interview. It's a variety of things. It's combined, just that there's a steady backlog and that the rules have changed. And every time the rules change, that slows things down because they have to, retrain all of the staff. And then there's also, changes in administration, changes in rules, new people coming in, old people going out. So there's a variety of factors that have resulted in this backlog getting greater and greater. There's also only so many visa categories available every year. And so even though you may have applied a long time ago and your application may be very, very strong and ready for approval, there aren't enough visas available for you. Some of you who have done family petitions might know about the Visa Bulletin. The Visa Bulletin is available at the Department of State website, and that publishes every month. You see how many visas are available and which preference category. So if it's a family member, if it's an adult married child, if it's a sibling, brother or sister, you can see the year and the month that they're processing at that time, and that when those visas are becoming available. And it doesn't necessarily always move month to month. Sometimes it jumps forward quite a bit. Sometimes it even goes backwards, but that will give you some sense of the processing time. Also on the USCIS website, there is something, an online tool called Track My Case, or also just processing times, where you can put in the number of the form that you filed. Say you filed an I-130, that's the first form for a petition for an alien relative, a family relative. And you can see, what is the current processing time for the form I-130, based on where you live and what you filed. Or if you already have the receipt number, you can put that receipt number in and the track my case status, and it will give you a sense of, what the expected outcome date is. But all of the dates are quite long, like, 12 months minimum, closer to, anywhere between a year to 5 years for some applications.
Yeah.
And then for family petitions can be even longer based on the visa bulletin.
Makes sense. Somebody just asked, I think people are very nervous about this. That's why I think I kind of see the same type of question, but it's a very good question. They said, we used food stamp. Does that affect when I become citizen?
I'm very happy to say that none of this is on the citizenship application. Sorry, I'm trying to find that slide again. Once you have your green card, you're in the clear. Just don't travel for more than 6 months at a time. But after you've already, so the public charge test, think of it as a screening. Once you pass it, you don't have to take it again, unless you go out of the country and you stay out for more than 6 months. There's a chance that they will re-screen you on your way back in. So that's, for anyone who already has a green card, that is the main thing to be careful for, is do not go out and stay out of the US for more than 6 months or 180 days at one time. But once you pass that test and you're here, you're good. For citizenship, there's other things they're looking at, but they don't look at public charge. They look at, your knowledge of English, your knowledge of US history, and knowledge of how the US government works and things like that. They look at if you had any criminal record. They look at if you're paying taxes. They look at if you have children that don't live with you, are you supporting those children, minor children, children that are not yet adults, things like that. But they do not look at your use of public benefits.
Makes sense. Thanks, Agatha. Somebody asked, who's going to be tested in public charge? Is it the applicant or the beneficiary? Agatha mentioned to us that it's most of the time it's a beneficiary. If you want to add something on that.
Yes, exactly. It's a little confusing because I know the language on the forms, like if you're doing a family petition, the I-130 form that I mentioned, the first person is the applicant is the sponsor. But when I'm using the word applicant here, I mean the beneficiary. I mean the person who's applying to get that green card for the first time, or the person who's applying to come into the United States, the family member that you're sponsoring. So that's why this whole thing about public benefits is so confusing, because if you once you understand that you were talking about the person coming in or getting that green card for the first time, then you think, well, but that person could never use public benefits because they're not here, or they don't have a green card yet, so they're not eligible for those benefits. So that's why the public benefits thing is really, I think, very much a big distraction, and sadly was intentionally made confusing by this administration to try to scare people from using public benefits. But if you yourself are just the sponsor, and you yourself already have that green card, or you're here as a refugee or asylee, and you're eligible for those benefits, you should use those benefits, because you're not the one being tested. It's the person trying to come in, not the person already here.
Makes sense.
It's the other factors, again, looking at the applicant or the beneficiary, the person trying to come in. They're looking at less at there is the public benefits issue, but there's the other things that are maybe less emphasized to look at would be their age, their health condition, if they've ever had health insurance, their family status, their income, their education level, their work experience and job skills, and if they've ever used a fee waiver. But again, similar to the benefits, if they're not here in the US, they likely have never used a fee waiver.
Makes a lot of sense. But as Agatha, so let me just say something in Amharic. So አሁን እንግዲህ እንደምትለን ያው እንደሰማችኋል አፕሊካንት ከሆነን የኛ የምንወስደው አይደለም። ለነዛ አፕላይ የምናደርግላቸው ሰዎች የወሰዱትን ነው የሚያዩት እንጂ እኛ የምንወስደውን አይደለም። እኛ መውሰድ እንችላለን። ኦሬዲ ኦልሬዲ ግሪን ካርድ እስካለን ድረስ እኛ መውሰድ እንችላለን። እነሱ የሚያዩት ቤኔፊሻሪዎቹ ልናመጣቸው የምንፈልጋቸው ሰዎች ደግሞ እዛ ካሉ ደግሞ መውሰድም አይችሉም። ኢትዮጵያ ካሉ ለምሳሌ ምንም መውሰድ አይችሉም። ሶ ግን እነሱ ቤኔፊሻሪዎቹ የሚወስዱትን ነው የሚጠይቁት። ለምሳሌ እዚህ ያለ ሰው እናንተ እንትንም አፕላይ የምታደርጉለት ግሪን ካርድ እንዲያገኝ የምትሞክሩለት ሰው ያ ሰው የሚወስደው እሱን ነው የሚያዩት፣ ያንን ሰው የሚወስደውን ማለት ነው። But the applicant, though, I just want to clarify something, Agatha, I think you mentioned this before, but with the applicant, in the case of the applicant, what they look at is the income, right? Let's say I'm trying to bring my mother from a different country. Let's say as a green card holder, I have used lots of services, but then now I have a good income. I have a good income that will enable me to sponsor her. I should be fine, right?
Yes, you'll be fine. Again, it's when I say applicant, I'm referring to the person who is applying for that green card for the first time. Yes. The beneficiary is another word for it. The person being sponsored. Mm-hmm. Whenever I refer to the person who's trying to bring that family member in, I call them the sponsorer. Yes. Or the sponsor, right?
Yes.
So, and the sponsor always has to fill out an affidavit of support. Yes. And if their income is not high enough, then they might have a joint sponsor. Yes. But the affidavit of support mostly looks at income. It looks at the last 3 years of taxes. Yes. And there might be some questions about whether or not they used benefits in the past, but it's not the same kind of test. They're not subject, the sponsor is not subject to the public charge test. Mm-hmm. It's only the applicant, the beneficiary. Mm-hmm. One thing that's also new that I didn't really specify, but here you'll see in the new rule column in yellow, is that there is a new form called Declaration of Self-Sufficiency. So again, under the old rule, they mostly looked at the sponsor. Now under the new rule, they're mostly looking at the applicant. And not only do they have to have a sponsor who, but now they have to have their own declaration of self-sufficiency. And that's the declaration that looks at, all of these other factors, their age, their work experience, their job experience, their education level, and looking at, they're basically making a declaration that once they come to the United States, once they get the status that they're applying for, they'll be able to be self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. So this is where the heart of the rule change really is. This is the most significant part, that it's not looking at the sponsor so much anymore. It's looking at the person coming in, the applicant, mm-hmm. the beneficiary.
Makes sense. Any question? You guys can put it on the chat, or you can open your mic and ask if you have any question. ብዙ ጥሩ እውቀት ያላት ሰው ስለሆነች እኔ ጥያቄ ካላችሁ Okay. I was calling back for interview. Okay. She said my brother was called to the embassy for interview in April. She said, but they held his case because of the pandemic. She said, do you have any idea when they are going to open the embassy? That's
unfortunately, the embassies continue to be closed around the world, and even for U.S. citizens are giving very limited services. I'm sorry, but I do not know when they're going to resume. I mean, it's a country by country basis. Forgive me, I'm not really that current on my knowledge of the situation in Ethiopia in terms of COVID-19, but if there are still a lot of cases of COVID in Ethiopia, it's probably likely that consulate will remain closed for quite a while. I don't know. I know that in the United States, a lot of services, immigration services, have slowed down. The only thing that they've really started to kind of reopen and prioritize has been citizenship because of the election. They were trying to make sure that anybody who had a pending application for naturalization, they were trying to get those through and get people the oath ceremony. such that they'd be able to register to vote and be able to vote in the upcoming election. After the election, maybe they will rejigger things and start to address some of the backlog of other types of applications. But I'm sorry, I do not know when the consulate will resume processing.
Thank you very much, Agatha. I think, okay, yeah, okay, she said thank you. I think we are about to finish, but if I'll just take one last question, and then I'll give Agatha or your colleague, if you guys have one last thing to say. So last question, if there's last question, I'll give one more chance.
Did somebody raise their hand?
Somebody raised their hand?
Yes.
S10.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to ask her, how can we communicate her if we need to talk to her personally about immigration case? I mean, if we need to get assistance, how can we communicate her? I mean, I already saw her phone number and email address, but are they working with that, or she has another difference? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. And actually, I should say this out loud just in case people are only able to hear the audio and not see the visual. But our phone number, the best way to reach us is to call our helpline. And the number there is 202-393-3572. Again, 202-393-3572. And if you need interpretation, if you need Amharic or Tigrinya or another language, please leave at least your name and your number, and then say the name of the language that you need, and we will call you back with an interpreter. If you don't speak enough English to leave a detailed message, please at least leave your name and phone number, and then speak the name of the language you need, Amharic, Tigrinya, another language, and we will call you back with an interpreter. You can also email us at helpline, that's HELPLINE at apalrc.org. That is the best way to reach us, because we have all of our staff are working remotely now. But if it comes in through our helpline or our helpline email, then everybody will see it where they're working, and we will be able to divide and make sure that somebody calls you back or emails you back as soon as possible.
Great. Okay. So somebody asked, this is very great. Somebody asked, there are some points that she wanted interpreted. So what I will do is, with this PowerPoint, I will also write it in Amharic, the one Agatha shared with us, and I will share with you all as well, in case there are a few questions or a few points that you did not understand based on what was said today. But this just very, very helpful. It gave me lots of knowledges, and I know for sure it will help our community, the immigrant community, so much. I know that for sure, because this is just a good wealth of information. And I just want to thank you so much for taking your time, you and your colleague, Agatha. This is really, really helpful. I work with the community, and I know how much there's a confusion and how much there's a challenge with this issue. So really, I appreciate. I hope you will join us another time as well through Zoom, you or your colleague, because people have lots of questions in regards to immigration. Yes, somebody said this is very helpful. Thank you so much. And so if you have any thing to say at the end, I just want to again thank you. And if you can come another time, you or your colleague, with another important information with immigration, we would really, really appreciate that so much. So I'll give you a chance to say the last thing, you or your colleague.
Thank you so much, Hamrawat, for the invitation. I really enjoy the opportunity to speak with the community. I have been honored to be able to serve a variety of clients from Ethiopia and Eritrea over the last couple of years. I've helped a lot of people become US citizens, and just such a beautiful, vibrant community, and really a big part of DC. You know, the Ethiopian community is quite large and vibrant here, and happy to be of help in any way that we can, and really appreciate the partnership. I know this is a very challenging time for many people, particularly immigrant families. I know the last 4 years, a lot of immigrant families have felt that they're being treated unfairly. And if APLRC can help to address any concerns or fears or things that people might be having, I'm very happy to do so. So please know that we're a resource here for you, and that we're in this together. And just stay safe and healthy, everyone. And please use those services that are out there to help people survive this pandemic. And if you have any questions about them, please do reach out to us. Thank you for all your leadership, Rohit. I think that it's wonderful that you offer these things to the community. And again, thank you for the opportunity to partner with you.
Thank you again. And just want to thank my Montgomery College colleagues as well. I know they were here giving information. We just try to give a lot of information in Montgomery College to our community. So on behalf of Montgomery College and the immigrant community, I again want to thank you guys so much. And hopefully we'll see each other again. Thank you so much.